So one of the things that's going to help us is if we can find out what quadrant something's in, then we can use the cast rule to find out if it's positive or negative, if it's sine, cos, or tan. So here we have an angle of 4,300 degrees. We want to find what quadrant it's in, and then find the first positive angle that would be coterminal with it. So for 4,300 degrees, if you divided that by 360, because 360 is how many degrees are in a circle, this tells us that it's 11.94 rotations. If you think of the unit circle, or if you think of going around one whole time, does it make sense that that's a quarter of the way around, this is halfway around, this is 3/4 of the way around, and this would be all the way around as you're going? So if you divide 4,300 degrees by 360, it tells us there's 11 full rotations and then 0.94 after that. So that's telling us it's going to be in quadrant 4, that 0.94. Now working with that, you could also just keep subtracting 360, and this would be a way that you would do it without a calculator. Just keep subtracting 360. Probably if I would start this, my 360 times table times 11 isn't the best. It's not too bad. But I would probably start off with maybe subtracting 360 10 times, because that's easier to do. That leaves me with 700 degrees. I could subtract 360 from that again, and then get 340 degrees. And since that's between 0 and 360, that would be a first angle that would be coterminal with 360. Of course, this isn't bad. If you've got a calculator, you could just divide it, then use the decimal to find that out. We're going to do something similar in radians, but a lot of the questions that we have to deal with radians have pi involved, and we're going to use we're going to think of pi and our unit circle this way. Now when we're talking in terms of pi, does it make sense that if you go 1 pi, that's only halfway around the circle? 2 pi is twice around. 3 pi would end up here. In fact, any odd number of pi would end up here. Any even number of pi would end up over here on the right. So if we have an angle of negative 23 pi over 6, and this would be a question that you would do it without a calculator, so what I would suggest is taking the 23 over 6 and changing it to a mixed fraction. Now 23 goes into 6 3 times, there'd be 5 left over, so we get negative 3 and 5/6. And with our unit circle here, if we're thinking about negative 3 and 5/6 pi, because that's what this is when we change it to a mixed fraction, and we're talking about pi, well, the negative 3, that's going to end here. Any odd number is going to end there. And then 5/6, since that's more than half, this is what this would look like. 1 pi, 2 pi, 3 pi, and then 5/6 is going to end here in quadrant 1. The negative directions tells us that we're going around clockwise. And since this is greater than a half, we're going to go into quadrant 1. The nice thing about radians is because we have a pi over 6 family to start with, to find out the first angle that that's going to be coterminal with, you just have to find out what pi over 6 family would be in that quadrant. And since it's in quadrant 1, it would be pi over 6. You could also just keep adding 2 pi just like we did with 360, add or subtract 360 until you get one that fits. But here, you see how easy it was to find out that it would be pi over 6? Because we know it ends in quadrant 1, because we know it's part of the pi over 6 family, we're going to figure that out right away. So I've got a sheet for you to practice a bunch of these. The majority of them are in Radians. And we'll do a couple together. Yeah, I think I need to give you one more. 2. I think I need to give you one more too. No, they're good. Anybody have too many? Thank you. Okay. Notice on the handout that there's 2 assignments. One is called assignment 1 and the other one is called assignment 2 because it got cut off there. So in assignment 1, it just says locate the angles, even though some of the questions later on have sine and cos. I want you to ignore that for the first assignment and just say what quadrant it ends in and what is the first positive coterminal angle. So for example, the first one is 13 pi over 6. If we change that to a mixed fraction, that will be 2 and 1/6 pi. If you think of even numbers being over here and odd ones being over here, we would get 2 would end here, and then you would go 1/6 pi more. Can you see that that would end in quadrant 1? And the first angle, part of the pi over 6 family in quadrant 1, that's coterminal with that, would be pi over 6. Of course, the answers are on the back for you to check. So it's going to end in quadrant 1. It's going to be pi over 6. Let's do one with bigger numbers together as well. Let's do number 5. (101 pi over 4). 101 divided by 4. What's the biggest whole number? 25. 25 times 4 is 100. That would leave you, 25 1/4 pi. Does it make sense that 25 is going to be an odd number here, and if we go 1/4 more, we're going to end in quadrant 3? So think of your pi plate. What is the pi over 4 family in quadrant 3? Something pi over 4. 5. And maybe you remember that in quadrant 3, that the number in the numerator is always just 1 more. 1 more than 4 is 5. 5 pi over 4. Okay. For assignment 2, so once you've figured out all of those for assignment 1, and there's some in degrees in there and some in radians, for assignment 2, they're going to also ask you to figure out the actual value for questions, I think it starts on number 13. 13 where they say cos. For question number 1, they're going to ask you for the coordinates. So for the first, think the first 8 that just give you the angle, they're going to ask you for the coordinates. So if you went to your unit circle and you had pi over 6, what are the coordinates there? And one thing I want you to start to try to do is try to do it from memory first and then go to your unit circle or your handout sheets to see if you've got it. So for pi over 6, you'd look at it, root 3 over 2, comma 1/2. And they'd both be positive because it's in quadrant 1. For 101 pi over 4, you'd say that's coterminal with 5 pi over 4. That's in quadrant 3. And they'll both be negative. And they're both negative root 2 over 2. And then once you get past to number 8, then you'll just list them as they are.